Welcome back everyone, and in today's guide we're going to be looking at all the status effects that you get from consumable buffs in Ark Survival Evolved. So I hope you guys enjoy, so sit back, grab a pen and paper, and let's get into the action. The first status effect we're going to be looking at is called Broth of Enlightenment. You will get this buff by consuming a Broth of Enlightenment. And what this will do is for the next 20 minutes you will gain 50% more experience. The next status effect we're looking at is called Enduro Stew. You will get this status effect by consuming an Enduro Stew. For the duration of the effect, which is 900 seconds, you will get 1.2 health regeneration. On top of that, this also counters the Battle Tar buff effect. The next consumable buff we're going to be talking about is called Battle Tar. You will get this when you consume a Battle Tar. Now what will happen is, for the duration of the effect, you'll get increased movement speed by 50%, your melee damage will be increased by 60%, your damage resistance will be increased by 15%, and you have an increased stamina regeneration, all for 3 minutes. However, at the cost of food and water consumption by 50%, and on top of that you slowly lose 0.45 health every second. And it will also negate the Enduro Stew buff. The next status effect we're looking at, and probably one of the most important status effects as well, similar to that of the Lesser Antidote, is called Bug Repellant. So what this will do is, for the next 10 minutes, it will reduce the aggressiveness of certain insects and other creatures towards the user. Those creatures are on the screen right now, and what the effect does for those creatures is also on the screen as well. So it just gives you a little more idea. Much easier than me saying everyone's names. Anyway, that all being said, I'm going to see you guys in the next status effect. The next consumable buff we'll be looking at is called Buzzed. You'll get this status effect by consuming a beer jar. And what will happen is, when you consume it for the next 2 minutes, you'll have increased insulation for both your hypothermal and hyperthermal insulation. On top of that, you'll have an increased damage resistance, so increased damage resistance and increased damage to, players and dinos. On top of that, with a reduced water consumption rate. However, at the cost of doing that, you will then lose stamina and you'll be losing health. Moreover as well, you'll have these blue bubbles around your screen, which will then affect your visibility. With that all being said, let's move on to the next status effect. The next consumable buff we're going to be talking about is called Cactus Broth. Now you'll get this by consuming a Cactus Broth, and what happens for the next 10 minutes, you'll have a reduced water consumption, but on top of that, this will also partially hide you from dinos. So as you know, with Bug Repellant, it protects you, it hides you from so many dinos, or gives you partial protection, allowing you to tame them. Cactus Broth is the same thing, but it applies to all dinos. So as most of you know, raptors, they have a very high aggro range, and as you can see, it hasn't attacked me yet. That's because the broth is helping protect me, but the closer and closer I get, it will eventually want to attack me. But as you can see, I can almost get basically to the raptor without it seeing me, and now it's going to kill me. So there you go. Consumable buff we're going to be looking at is called Calien Soup. You'll get this consumable buff when you eat Calien Soup. And what's going to happen for the next 15 minutes is that your hypothermal insulation will be increased by 50. And on top of that, your water consumption rate is reduced by 25%. Next status effect we're going to be talking about is called Focal Chili. You'll get this status effect by consuming a Focal Chili Stew. And what will happen is, for the next 15 minutes, you will then have an increased movement speed by 25%. And on top of that, your crafting speed will be increased by 100%. The next status effect we are looking at is called Fria Curry. You'll get this status effect by consuming Fria Curry. And what will happen is, your hypothermal insulation will be increased by 50, and it will reduce your food consumption by 25% for the next 15 minutes. The next status effect we're looking at, and probably the most important status effect, is called Lesser Antidote. Now you'll get this status effect by consuming a Lesser Antidote. And what's going to happen is, for the next 3 minutes, you will going to be immune to swamp fever, lamprey poison, mega rabies, and the Dillosorphus venom. And on top of that, what this status effect is also used for is to actually cure you. So if you do get swamp fever or lamprey poison or mega rabies, then you can use it to cure yourself from those effects. The next status effect we're looking at is called Lazarus Chowder. You'll get this by consuming a Lazarus Chowder stew. What it will do is, it will increase your stamina recovery as well as reduce your oxygen consumption for the next 10 minutes. The next consumable buff we're looking at is called Mushroom Brew. Now this brew is not used on yourself, but rather your dino. So in Ark Aberration there's Radiation Zone, and for any dino that is not immune to radiation, such as the Roll Rat or the Ravager, they're obviously going to die because they're going to get radiation sickness. Now what the Mushroom Brew does is when you feed it to the dino, for the next 2 minutes they will be then immune to the radiation. So I'm going to go over ahead and feed my Ravager, and as you can see, he is now no longer gaining radiation sickness, rather he's now losing the radiation sickness. The next status effect we're looking at is called Iced Water. You'll get this status effect when you either drink iced water from either a canteen or an iced water jar. Now, what will happen is when you consume the buff, for the next 45 seconds, your hypothermal insulation, so the hot protection, will be increased by 84 points. However, your hypothermal, so your cold protection, will be reduced by that exact same amount. The next consumable buff we're looking at is called Reaper Queen Pheromone. You'll get this effect when you consume the Reaper Queen Pheromone, which you can get off a dead Reaper Queen. Now, what will happen is when you consume it, or any dino consumes it, for the next 5 minutes, it will make it that a baby Reaper will not attack you for that duration. This can also stack. The more you eat, the longer this will last for. The next consumable buff we're going to be looking at is called Poison Immunity Element. You'll get this buff when you consume an Arispheric mushroom on Ark Aberration. And what it does is it protects you from the fertile spores debuff, which you can find from these mushrooms in Red Zone Aberration. Do note though that these mushrooms are also the knockout mushrooms in the game, so unless you have a high enough fortitude, they will start to knock you out. The next consumable buff we're looking at is called Poison Immunity Biolum. You'll get this when you consume an aquatic mushroom, and what the effect does is it will give you protection against the freezing spore debuff in Ark Aberration, which you'll get from the freezing spores in the air or freezing spores that come out of the blue mushrooms. Now also note that the more you have of the mushroom, the higher the duration, as only one mushroom lasts for about 4 seconds. So the more you have, the longer the duration. The next consumable buff we're going to be looking at is called Poison Immunity Fertile. You'll get this status effect when you consume an Agraviric mushroom on Ark Aberration. Now what will happen is it has two effects. First of all, one, it will protect you from the dizzy spore effect that you get when interacting with the red mushrooms with the red stalk. On top of that, it will give you an 0.05% health regeneration at the same time. Or if you've already been infected by the dizzy spores, it will reduce the cooldown. So I'm going to go ahead and eat a bunch now. And for every mushroom you eat, so every one mushroom equals 4 seconds. The more you have, the longer the effect. So I'm going to walk in now. As you can see, I'm not affected whatsoever. The next status effect we're looking at is called Insulating Warmth. You'll get this status effect when you consume wyvern milk. And what will happen is for the next 3 minutes, your hypothermal protection, that's protection against the cold, will be increased by 787, and it will make you immune to any diseases or cure you of any diseases that you might currently have. On top of that, it will also make you immune to the damage over time debuff called Inflamed when you were attacked by the dragon boss or a wyvern. However, the wyvern milk will not protect you from the inflamed buff from lava or oil jars, and it does not protect you from the impact damage given to you by the creatures mentioned above. The next consumable buff we're going to be looking at is called Shadow Stake Salute. And you'll get this by consuming a Shadow Stake Salute. Now what will happen is when you consume it, your hypothermal and hyperthermal insulation will be increased by 50, your weapon recall will be reduced by 80%, and you will have better vision in the dark for the next 3 minutes. Now how the better vision in the dark actually works is it doesn't actually give you night vision. What it does is it allows you to light sources, so like torches, or that illuminate even more brighter, so they have a better sense of brightness. So I'm going to activate the stake right now, and you're going to see the sun's going to become hard for me to look at because they don't recommend eating during the daytime. And as you can see right now, my screen has just been engulfed in light. And if I go into the shield, it's just going to get even worse. But that's what it does. So the Shadow Stake Salute amplifies every light source. It makes it brighter. Moving on to the final two status effects in this video called Digesting and Healing. Their descriptions are on the screen right now, as it's a tad easier to explain with words rather than speaking. Anyway, with that all being said, thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope this video helped you understand the consumable buffs within Ark, and that you have a great understanding. Now, my apologies this video took so long. I know it took a while, but the editing, trust me, been crazy. Anyway, with that all being said though, thank you so much for watching, and thank you for recently for hitting 850 subs. I am absolutely stoked, but that'll be discussed in another video. Anyway, thank you again, guys. You're awesome, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Take care and have an awesome, fantastic day. Goodbye.